Welcome to this week's episode of On Record PR. I am one of your hosts, Jennifer Simpson Carr, and today I am joined by my incredible teammates going around the screen, Leslie Richards, Sarah Larson, and Becky Bergman. Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, Jennifer.
You each have been on podcast episodes previously, so we won't dive into your roles and your responsibilities at the agency, but I will direct our listeners to our website and past episodes if they would like to learn more about each of you. Today, we are here to dive into something that has been rewriting the rules of media relations, which is Generative Engine Optimization, or GEO. Law firms have long relied on earned media to build credibility, shape market perception, elevate their lawyers, and distinguish themselves in a crowded marketplace, in crowded practice areas, in crowded geographies. But the rise of AI, search, and GEO is changing how that credibility is discovered and interpreted. So with tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Google's AI overviews, it's now answering the questions that used to send readers online straight to a website, a news article, a podcast episode, and it's changing the way brands have to work to earn visibility online. So that is a lot to unpack, and we've already agreed there's probably a part 2 and beyond that in store. But for today, Leslie, I want to start with you. We are hearing a lot about AI search, GEO, the future of visibility. I'm sure every listener has heard the acronyms and the stories. For law firms specifically, why does all of this matter?
I think for law firms, it really matters quite a bit. These platforms that you just mentioned, the AI overviews, they're now 90% of Google searches now result in an AI overview. People are using ChatGPT, Perplexity for search as an alternative to Google. So all of these interfaces are becoming a layer between the public and the firm. So when somebody asks who's the best employment lawyer, or who's the best bankruptcy counsel in a particular jurisdiction or geographic area, the AI answer is often the entire interaction. And the other thing is law firms and searches for law firms are high stake, low frequency, and very trust dependent. And what generative engine optimization is about building that trusted profile that allows you to be surfaced when those conversations come up. It's not a new problem. It's really an acceleration of an old one, which is that credibility has to be earned through third-party independent sources. And what's changed really is who's doing the synthesizing. It's now an AI tool. And so that's really why this is important. If you're not connected to those topics, you're not part of the conversation that people are having with these tools.
And one important point to that, if you're not connected to these topics online, a lot of our attorneys like to say, all my business comes in from personal referrals. And while that might seem true, all of those people also went to your website to make sure that you are who you say you are and that referral is valid. So it's not enough to be awesome in court or to be awesome at the Bar Association. They have to be seen to be awesome online as well.
Yeah, because I think even if people are receiving a referral, people are also using these tools to validate the contacts that have been shared among professional networks.
Yeah.
Gina and I just had this conversation with a very small group of attorneys last week, which is that most people are surprised to hear up to 80% of the buyer's decision-making journey happens online through that validation process before they pick up the phone, send an email, before they contact a human. So all of this is incredibly important, and from what we're learning, continues to become even more important if that click never happens.
Yep.
So Becky, as our director of media relations, I'd love to know your perspective on how this is changing how you think about and how our media team thinks about the purpose of earned media for law firms.
I think that's a great question, Jennifer. And I don't think the traditional purpose of earned media will go away at all. I think an article in Bloomberg Law, Reuters, or Law 360 still reaches an important audience and provides tremendous credibility. But I think now, and Sarah can certainly weigh in on this, our team is thinking beyond the initial readership. So a strong piece of earned media becomes part of the information that helps establish what a lawyer is known for,
Yes.
what the issue they're associated with, and why they're a credible source on that topic. So if I had to summarize it, I would say that placement isn't the end game anymore. It becomes an asset in a much larger ecosystem, which I think both Leslie and Sarah touched up on.
Could I
Absolutely.
respond to Becky? I think that's a really good point. We've had attorneys say, I operate in this market and my prospective clients are not in Law 360. So I'm not that interested in placing a quote there. The problem is, in order for them to be surfaced when somebody says bankruptcy attorney or employment attorney, whatever, the AI tools need to find that association between that attorney, and Law 360 is a very credible source. And AI evaluates the credibility of those sources. So you're absolutely right, Becky. It is it's one piece of a much larger ecosystem, and helping clients understand, I think, is super important.
If I may add to that, though, too, Leslie, I've been having conversations with everyone on the team about this and with Sarah as well. You can get 10 placements, right? But if you got 10 quotes in an article in 10 different articles, I don't think it is valuable anymore if getting, quotes in 3 articles that are geared toward the practice group or the topic. So that's helping to build credibility, I think, and just adds again to what you just said.
Absolutely.
It really sounds like our media team approaches all of this from I don't know, 30,000 foot view. I hate cliches. I just used one, but you really have to look at this and say, who's reading our content? Who do we want to be in front of? You're also now considering the machines and how the information that you share to reporters could surface in searches.
Absolutely.
So, Sarah, you, Becky, Maria, several of our incredible teammates were reporters in your former life before you joined the agency. And so we always greatly value learning from each of you what reporters are looking for, why things matter, why they would choose one story over another, and when to pitch them. I love when you tell us, like, no, they're in a newsroom meeting right now. This is not the time of day you want to be reaching their inbox. So we're always learning from each of you. And I'm curious, Sarah, how might AI change how reporters are finding their legal sources? Does the proactive positioning matter more and is more important now than reactive pitching in this environment?
I mean, I would say I don't tend to like superlatives. I think they're both important, but the bottom line is that journalists, like a lot of people, get excited by shiny new things, and they've also got pressure in their industry too to learn new tools to keep up on what's happening. So yeah, a lot of journalists are using AI, but in very specific ways. A quick funny story. All of this feels to me like the person who started her journalism career 25 years ago, 30 years ago. Oh my. I got an award once for a story that I wrote in like 1996 because I was the first person in our newsroom to use the computer on the internet. I know that makes me sound really old, but it wasn't that long ago that every journalist got access to the internet. Like, that was a big deal when the entire newsroom got access to the internet. This is kind of the same thing. Like, all the journalists have access to all of these tools. I think there's a little more trepidation about how they implement AI, and we probably, if we don't have time to talk about that today, that's definitely a conversation for another day too. But we do know that they're using it. Muckrak's latest survey of journalists, it's actually the 2026 State of Journalism report, found that 8 out of 10 journalists are using at least one AI tool, and that's up from 77% last year. ChatGPT is first, Gemini, Claude usage this year has doubled to 12%. So this is what journalists are reporting that they're using. What does this mean? It does not mean they're using this to write their stories. That's not what they're doing. And I don't know any newsroom that is actually doing that and broadcasting that to the world, because it is now a trust issue, which we've talked about constantly for weeks. They're using it to understand the background on a complicated topic, to identify the sources that they want to reach out to identify the themes of maybe not just their first story, but their second day story and their feature story. So they're looking at who is already talking about this issue online, which goes back to Leslie's point and to Becky's point, that it makes that all the more important that you, as the source, the lawyer, are found online for the things that you want to be talking about. So that leads us back to the full, we like to call it the ecosystem, the full ecosystem: media mentions, articles, LinkedIn posts, social media campaigns, awards, citations, all of these little things bubble up to build a picture for, as you said, the machines to confidently say, yes, this person is who you want to talk to.
And to that point, it used to be that we had to draw a connection between all of those pieces. We had to link things. We had to make sure that we had backlinks, that we had all these various ways of helping algorithms identify connections between sources, between topics, between people. Large language models don't need that. Large language models are reviewing content across the board. And for that reason, two things. One, I think the consistency between platforms has become a real issue. So if you have a byline and there's an author's note at the end of that byline, that is in line with what it says on your attorney bio page, and what it says on your LinkedIn page also matters. So what's happening is the discipline of content marketing and thought leadership and the discipline of media relationships, article placement, quotes, etc., are really much more commingled than they've ever been. And they really need to communicate with each other on an ongoing basis, which I think we do a great job of on our team. Sorry, not to plug, but it's true, we do. And that's a development that is fairly recent, that need for a cohesive presentation of who you are around those topics across platforms.
So this is interesting because what I'm hearing from you is discipline versus volume. And this came up at a conference. So that's why I wanted to ask, because I'm curious. Some listeners might hear, well, that's a lot of work. We need a lot of things out there online that talk about us. But also others might hear, but then we need to apply the discipline so that all of the things we're putting out there are saying the same things. What's your expertise on that? I mean, is it volume and discipline?
It's not
Okay.
It's not one or the other, because there's a difference between association and surfacing. You need enough content out there that you, John Doe, are associated with the topic of employment law, right? You need enough content that you are who the LLM puts in its pool of resources to answer a question. Then, if there are 6 lawyers in that pool and your insight is the most original, or your profile is the most consistent and the most trusted, you're going to be the cited source in that AI summary. So I know sometimes I think to clients and even to our own team, it sounds confusing. Do we need volume and consistency, or do we need the earth-shattering insight on a particular topic? It's both.
So
yeah, I mean, I think the key point there is that if there's no public online footprint at all or very small, AI is not going to surface you as an answer to whatever question the searcher is asking. So you have to build out that footprint.
So to their point, I think that we are working, and I know Sarah and I and the rest of the team, more closely and more strategically to make sure that our attorneys are not just out there and getting their name and their placement, and they're not just appearing in the media in general, but we're putting them in the right conversations, right? So that they can get their expertise out and they can share what they're known for.
Mm-hmm.
So
and what they want to be known for.
It's
Yes.
interesting because we continue to hear from law firm clients that they care very, very deeply about expertise and their niche experience. And so that's important just in how clients vet prospective attorneys and law firms. But it's even more interesting because for the firms who are online or the attorneys trying to be all things to all people, it sounds from this conversation like you may be losing an opportunity by confusing the machines,
Yeah, yeah.
not being able to place you in your actual area of expertise where you want to be found.
Yes.
Totally.
It's just like the old days of search. You were much more likely to be able to rank for a very specific niche keyword than a very broad one where there was a lot of competition. I think it's hard sometimes for attorneys to pick a lane. They're hesitant to do it, but the attorneys who do pick a lane have a much faster route to visibility.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Ruble Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses worldwide. With an expert team positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by an international faculty, Furia Ruble enhances our clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams. To learn more, visit furiaruble.com.
So before we end our time together, I'd like to ask each of you if our listeners could walk away after listening to this episode today and take one action to help them with media relations in the age of GEO, what would you encourage them to do?
May I start with that?
Yeah,
Sure.
go.
Sure.
Because I think that's a great question. And I think it's a conversation that we're having more and more. I would say identify 3 to 5 issues that the attorneys or the firms want to be known for over the next year. And, if someone, whether it's AI or a client or even a reporter, went looking for this expertise, would they find it? And if the answer is no, then that's where you need to put your sights, I think, going forward. And so I think it's just really key to identify those 3 or 5 areas and be very strategic and focused about getting your message out.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna piggyback on what Becky just said. My original thought was don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That is the biggest, hardest fight that we fight with our clients because lawyers are perfectionists. They think every single thing they put out has to be the absolute best thing they've ever done. It doesn't. It has to be good, and really great stuff every now and then is really what we're striving for. But they get paralyzed by this idea of perfection. Nobody's perfect. And to feed into that, to Becky's point, authenticity is so important right now, particularly when you're working with the media. So one of the tools that journalists are also using is AI detectors. I'll find it, Jennifer, and send you the link to a story so you can include it in the show notes. I read this story by a journalist, and off the top of my head, I can't remember who it was, so I do need to go find it. But they got put out a call for sources. I think it was through Quoted, one of the platforms that we use to connect with the media. And they got a ton of responses. The guy was curious, so he went to go figure out who these people were. 3 of them were not people at all. They were completely made up personas that were reaching out to him, actually created by a PR agency. That's how bad it was, right? The journalists don't want that. They're using AI to understand topics, to identify people, but not to write content. They don't want AI generated content. They want our lawyers' original thoughts. So to Becky's point, authenticity is going to be really, really important moving forward.
And I think it's an interesting note too about the AI and that story, Sarah, because when we are going out online and seeing quoted opportunities and HARO opportunities, I'm seeing more and more little notes at the bottom of the opportunity that says no AI responses, please.
Yeah.
Or AI responses will not be considered.
Yeah.
So they really
And
don't
that gets into a whole nother topic of what is something really AI generated and how good are the checkers? Like Quoted works with Pangram. They started incorporating Pangram into the journalist side of Quoted, I think in 2025. So every response that you submit through a platform like that goes through an AI checker. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. I mean, we're finding that a lot of content that was human written is getting flagged as AI. So that would be a really interesting conversation for part 3.
So, Leslie, before you answer your one takeaway, I'm going to be very blunt and say, for those of you listening who have either thought or said out loud, well, why do we need a communications director? Why do we need our PR agency strategic partner? Harvey or ChatGPT or Claude or insert any large language model here can write our pitches for us. That is not the answer, and it's not the work that is going to really resonate with reporters solely based on what we just heard you both describe.
Absolutely. And they're coming up with workarounds too. So some of the calls that we've seen recently for sources were, let me know if you're interested. I'll set up a time for us to talk. And they don't really want to have the full conversation on the phone, but they want to be able to talk to you to know that you are who you say you are and that your thoughts are your own.
And I think to that point too, Sarah and Jennifer, it comes down to the relationships, right? So when you're asking that question, why do we need a communication director? Why do we need a PR firm? Because despite all this technology, which is amazing and wonderful, and I'm sort of a tech geek, it comes down to relationships. And that's what Sarah and I are always talking about too. It just comes down to the relationship that you're building with reporters, sources, attorneys. So, and that's always going to be the most important.
Sorry. See, I told you we would just keep talking. Every journalist, I'll just make this quick point. But every journalist we work with knows that we would never set them up with a fake source, ever. Like we would fall on our own swords before we would ever do that. So it's a trust factor. And when they're working quickly, they may have gotten a submission from somebody that's a beautifully, worded 400-word response, but they don't have time to go figure out if that person is actually a person and actually knows what they're talking about. They're going to be like, oh, Becky's going to set me up with, this corporate attorney at this firm in New York City. All good. So.
Yeah. And all I was going to say, Sarah, is trust is a very valuable currency. And I think we see it across industries, across communication channels, across all disciplines. Trust is at an all-time low. And so people are really seeking ways to verify, and our LLM models are no different. They're looking for trusted sources. And I think that gets me to my one takeaway, which is that these disciplines of content marketing, communication, media relations are no longer siloed, if they ever were, but they are now much more interconnected. So if I were to give a managing partner or a CMO one takeaway, I would say, look at your process for every piece of communication and develop a process around it. Make sure that you're consistent across channels. Make sure that you are specific in the way you describe your practices, your attorneys, and your firm. And then make sure that message is carried through media relations, content marketing, email, social media, and put a process in place for every piece of content that goes out that helps connect all those dots.
So, to the point that Leslie just made about marketing and PR, it's no longer silos. It's not. And I think that that's what makes us unique. Again, not to plug our agency, but I know that I'm tapping into Sarah a lot more, Leslie, our tech folks, we have several people on our team that have a law background and have that expertise. So I find myself especially tapping into each of those areas. So back to the point that you made earlier, Jennifer, yeah, you could have Harvey, you could have ChatGPT, but we're a team that, again, it comes down to relationship, expertise, and sharing that information and working together. And you're just not going to find that in AI, at least not right now.
Well, thanks to each of you for your time today and your insights and your expertise. Something I value so much about being a member of this team is that everyone has such a unique background and brings that to bear every day so that we can continue learning from each other. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. We appreciate all of your reviews, all of your emails with topics and thought leaders that you're interested in hearing from. We will see you again in 2 weeks, where we will have part 2 of this conversation, and maybe 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sure that we could continue recording on a lot of these topics and go in different directions. Thanks to each of you, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Bye, Jennifer.
Thank you.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Ruble Communications. This episode is edited by Isabel Horan and Christian Yamula. Visit www.onrecordpr.com for resources and more information.